Without further ado, please extend a warm NCS welcome to our guests this morning, Mark and Andy.
Excellent. You know, I'm really excited this morning because Andy shared with me before at the table that he was so inspired by that video earlier that he was going to do a box jump up onto the stool right here. So we're looking forward to that later. So in all seriousness, it's always great to hang out with NCS brothers. One of the coolest things I've found in just going to a number of the chapters around the area and around the country is it just feels like home. And I see some familiar faces, some new faces, and it's just always I don't know, the experience always feels pretty similar. You just walk into a room and you know that there's a bunch of guys that have your back and are supporting you. So looking forward to just sharing a little bit about our story and how our friendship came together, how our business relationship came together, and quite frankly, it all started with NCS. So with that, I think I'm just going to have Andy and I start out just giving you a little background on. Start with mine? Okay. So I was actually born, not everybody knows this, but I was actually born in Pittsburgh. My father had been working for Westinghouse and took a job opportunity back in New Jersey. The family had been in New Jersey. My parents were actually immigrants from the Netherlands. My mom was born in Amsterdam. My dad's parents were born in the Netherlands. And so came to New Jersey when I was 2 years old and grew up kind of with in a Christian Reformed, Dutch Reformed background, heavy Calvinism focus, and went with the three-legged stool concept of church family, being exposed to faith at home, and then also going to Christian school, which I did up until I was in high school, and also went on to Calvin University in Grand Rapids, Michigan for 4 years before moving back to the area. So I was very blessed to have faith always part of the environment that I grew up in. But I also needed to really make it my own at the same time. And there were definitely times where I wandered a bit throughout my teen years and early 20s. Reminded of the hymn, the line, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. And so definitely had some wandering in there. I think my wife was the one who really helped take my faith up a notch. And that was a real blessing, and just getting more involved in our church as we were in our early to mid-20s. My wife and I actually met in middle school and dated very briefly in high school, went on different paths. But we came back around and reconnected at church, and 25 years of marriage later and 5 kids later, it's been quite a journey, and so a real blessing. But that's just a quick snapshot of what my life has looked like so far.
By the way, after brief backgrounds, we just wanted to give you a sense for what NCS has meant to each of us and how it really ended up being God's plan for us to work together. So, saludos de Puerto Rico, my homeland. I was born in Mayagüez, grew up in Rio Piedras. Can be fluent if immersed for a couple days again, but don't use it, you lose it. But I grew up in a lower middle class home. My dad worked for the U.S. government in the agricultural department. So if you've ever traveled abroad and come back, you know, you go through customs, but you also usually go through a checkpoint to see if you're bringing anything that can harm our agriculture in the United States, whether it's plants or animals or whatever. That was his job. And he worked very hard. He worked odd hours, odd shifts, worked almost every Sunday because he got paid double. So he hardly was ever at church. But fortunately, grew up Catholic. My mom was a very strong Catholic believer, would never miss a Sunday, and make sure that she was dragging 2 of the 3 kids because my older brother lived in Virginia, first marriage. But she set the example for faith. My dad set the example for a very strong work ethic, and typical immigrant type education was going to be, very important to all of us in order to do better financially. And so that was my pursuit. I knew I was the geek in high school with the Wall Street Journal under his arm, knew I was going to be in investing and banking, something to do with money, and was going to make a lot of it. That was my goal. And God had that plan in place. He just had a lot more that I didn't understand. I grew up with the faith, but I didn't grow up with any understanding really of what Jesus was all about, what the Spirit was all about. And it wasn't until I came back from Bogota, Colombia, after 2 years with Chase Manhattan Bank, at the age of 26, where within 6 months I met my wife, who was a young believer at the time. And it was very obvious that if I wanted to spend time with her, I needed not only to go to church, but to take faith seriously and understand it and embrace it. And so I was commuting from Manhattan to New Jersey, first on Sundays, then Sunday mornings for Bible studies, then Monday nights for further Bible study. By the time we got married in 1986, I thought I was a Christian, but I had just built a lot more head knowledge. It wasn't really until Promise Keepers in 95, I think it was, at RFK that I got it, and that God got me. 10 years later, Tom Lane comes up to me and says, I want you to go to this retreat at the Mohonk Mountain House. I said, well, I can't. That weekend I have to be down in Liberty University coaching my son's homeschool basketball team. But give me the details, because this is a Friday, Saturday thing, and the retreat goes to Sunday. So I drove into the retreat around 10:30, 11 p.m. Saturday night, go up and hear some noise, and people are playing broom ball and big goblets of red wine and cigar smoke everywhere. So this is interesting. So I got a taste of it on Sunday. A few months later, Tom says, I think God wants us to start a chapter in Bergen County. Now, I was commuting to Manhattan, so my first reaction was, Tom, that's never going to work. But my second comment was, but I'm willing to try. So we met in his house, in his living room, for about 6 months as a small group, the playbook, right? Get some friends together, share life, and then invite others to experience the same thing. So a couple months into meeting in his living room and putting up a video with some stale music, someone said, we need somebody who can lead us in worship. And somebody knew Mark, so they invited him to come. And he's a very accomplished musician, very humble at it. Couple of albums out, that he's produced. But he still leads worship, or it's part of the worship team at his house. So we invited Mark, and I'll let him tell you the second part of that.
Yeah, so I was just the guitar player. They needed somebody, so I got recruited for that purpose. And what a blessing that was, and what an opportunity to be able to hang out and get to know these guys, meeting in Tom's living room for pretty much almost a year at that time, and just building a really nice core group of friends that really connected, which became the leadership team for our chapter, really. And so we went through that first season, and it was interesting to watch through the course of the year in Tom's family room to just see, start out with like 6 or 7 guys, and then the next week it would be like 10, and then the following week it would be like 15 and 20, and eventually we were up to, I think, probably like 30 or 40 guys meeting in Tom's family room in Franklin Lakes. And we finished the season out for the summer, and I think it was Brian Hance got the brainstorm to, why don't we do this one-time thing next year in the fall? And he was on Ron Hutchcraft's board. I know Ron, some of you may know Ron, and suggested, why don't we do one big blowout event at the High Mountain Golf Club in Franklin Lakes? And I said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I'll bring my band from church. And so we had a morning set up where our worship band would lead, and Ron came to speak, and over 100 guys showed up. And we said, guess we're not going back to Tom's house now. And so we did end up that, we knew we were onto something there and that God was moving, so we ended up staying at High Mountain Golf Club for that whole year. And the numbers stayed fairly close to that. We were getting, between 80 and 100 guys out every other week. And we got to the end, and we had to reevaluate and decide, are we going to stay here, or are we going to maybe find a little bit bigger space, because we were actually running out of capacity. And so we ended up moving to the Indian Trail Club in Franklin Lakes, which was a much bigger space. And things continue to grow. We had some really amazing speakers there through the years. I think there was a big stretch where we were probably averaging almost 120 guys a meeting. And so we would meet every other week or twice a month, and then on the in-between weeks we would have just energy groups where guys would just get together and chat and share with one another and pray and that sort of thing. So and then that went on until at the Indian Trail Club was doing some renovation work, and things weren't going to work anymore going forward, and that's when other doors opened up. Which was fantastic. We had Aldo, who's a local restaurant owner in Wyckoff, was willing to give us a try and open up his restaurant, The Brick House, to us, which was up on the screen earlier. And we've been meeting there ever since, and it's been a great relationship. And I'd say our average numbers are maybe down a little from the peak, but we're still getting a really nice showing of guys out. And it's the group's just been an amazing blessing to us, for sure. So,
my favorite time of the week was Friday mornings, really, for many years. Still is. It's still Zoom. I've moved to Florida a couple months ago, so I'm still in transition. But thank goodness for the Zoom. And then there's the Palm Beach group, which is very vibrant, and I'll hopefully be able to start going there regularly. But I mentioned earlier, I had a passion for money, I guess, before God got a hold of me. And it was a learning process that was helped by my wife, a strong believer, but also a much more generous person than I was, trying to catch up to her. But she kept nudging me, biblically speaking, it's not our money, it's his. And read some books, and I think Keller was a big part of he was so awesome and so wise. But I finally got it, that, and as a pastor friend of mine, now retired, says, when God blesses you financially, he seldom has you in mind. And it hit the heart. So, we got to the point where we realized that if God blesses us to a higher standard of living, it's really for a higher standard of giving. And so we started praying and doing some work as to where, that giving should be. And we decided as a couple that it should be exclusively to Christian purposes and to grow the kingdom. And he also led us to draw a line in the sand that our lifestyle wasn't going to change much, regardless of what happened financially, that anything, and don't get me wrong, I wish I could say, and we're living sacrificially, and it's not. We're hopefully living generously with an open hand and helping bless others. But that realization came around the same time that Mark and I started working together. After 23 years on Wall Street, I was starting to pray earnestly, regularly about the next step. I was still enjoyed what I did, didn't enjoy the commute all that much, 3 hours a day, in and out of Manhattan, bigger company, more red tape. But I still enjoyed the challenge of the financial puzzle, trying to outguess the market and looking toward the long term and, in a disciplined fashion. And Mark and I had been serving on the board of NCS, so we got to know each other and had joked around a little bit about maybe working together. He was a sole practitioner as a financial advisor. I was doing institutional research and money management. And in August of 2008, after a couple weeks at Camp of the Woods, I remember talking to Andy Mills. Some of you may know him. And came back and said, Mark, what if we got serious and wanted to work together? What would that look like? It took us all of 2 weeks to figure it out. I bought half of a very small company, we shook hands in late August. It would be effective at the end of 2008, hoping for one more big bonus at Alliance Capital at the time. It was a lot smaller than I thought because the market was collapsing, right? Week after we shook hands, Lehman Brothers goes under, and then the government gets together and does TARP and this or that. And the joke back then, because I remember us starting to work together and going to the retreat in March of 2009, and I think Jim Lane was referencing the joke, the market hasn't been this oversold since tomorrow, but literally we were within days of the bottom, right? So it was a very good time to start working together. We honored our initial commitment, even though the financial world had revalued everything. And now we're in our 16th year of working together, and it's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to tag on to something that Andy mentioned is that we agreed on a price for the business, and then all of a sudden the world goes to hell. And I have to say that Andy's always been an example for me, not just of his generosity, and he's mentored me in that regard too, and I've adopted a lot of the things that I've learned from him. The other thing is he's a man of integrity, and we had a handshake deal, and he honored that, even though he could have been in a position to renegotiate the terms since the situation had changed, and he didn't. So just kudos to him on that. But
the stress level was pretty high. Talk about the retreat a little bit.
Yeah, the stress level was really high, and we were really we had gotten to the retreat in Hot Springs, Virginia, and just really needed to unwind a little bit. So Andy suggested, hey, maybe we should go get massages. It might be a good way to just relax a little bit. And so he went down ahead to reserve the spots, and I had to take care of a couple of quick things, and then he was waiting for me to get down there, and they were like, they asked him, are you ready to go? And he just said, well, no, I got to wait for my partner. So we kind of thought after that maybe we should just say business partner might be a better descriptor. We were very blessed, and I think we transitioned to our third partner, Tim Parker, in 2010, which really became Regency what it is today. And we've continued to grow and add on new partners and new employees. We started out in 2010 with about $86 million of assets under management, and currently at about almost $500 million right now, roughly about 13 years later, 14 years later. And it's just been a real blessing. And I think it's just been really cool to see a group of NCS brothers come together, as friends, but then also be able to come together as business partners and coworkers, and to be able to have it feels a lot of times to me like NCS was almost the core of where our partnership began, and so we also feel that too, just being rooted in faith in our culture with our company is a huge component. I know that it was earlier mentioned before some of our a statement from our core values, and that is something that is non-negotiable. A few other just items from our core principles is that we're a group of experts serving others excellently with integrity and transparency in a collaborative manner. As we assist clients in achieving and maintaining financial security, we seek to inspire them to live generously so that they can bless others. And a couple of our main goals as a firm is to build healthy and respectful relationships, to be leaders in our communities, to assist clients in meeting their financial objectives, of course, the most important, to provide meaningful careers to our employees, and to grow profitably without compromising service quality. So I just see that there's a lot of embedded in our company culture, and I've always been a big fan of this. I've perhaps it's my Calvinistic work ethic that I grew up with, in the sense of you can't. To me, I can't just separate and say, well, I'm going to church on Sunday and I'm going to be the Christian on the weekend, and then I'm going to go into the office, I'm going to be somebody different and just focus on work. I feel very strongly from a philosophical and theological perspective that the two are intermingled. You have to think about how you're going to bring your faith into what you do every day, whether that's working, whether that's spending time with your family, that's spending free time having fun. Whatever it is, I think it's really important to keep your faith integrated so that your character is really stays consistent. You're not just one guy one day and somebody else the next day. And so I think that's been a really crucial part of our company culture, just trying to integrate our faith into what we do. And just a few examples, we'll have staff meetings regularly, and we'll often do a Bible study and have some prayer time during that. We don't require it for employees if somebody felt uncomfortable with that. But interestingly enough, even some of our employees, which we're not quite sure where they stand with regard to their faith, they come and they love it and they enjoy it and they ask for prayer for brother, sister, parents struggling, kids struggling. It's great to be able to have the freedom to do that and incorporate that as part of our company culture. And there's just so many other areas, I think, just trying to be respectful and loving to our employees, and meeting with clients too. A lot of our clients are Christians. It's really cool to be able to sometimes at the conference room table right there just pray together about something, whatever is a struggle or something that they're going through. And we also incorporate prayer requests for our clients during some of our meetings. We'll sometimes send cards out to that effect and letting them know that people know that we're holding them up in prayer. But I also think that another important aspect is the way we approach philanthropy and our view of philanthropy. And I'll let Andy share a little bit more, unpack a little bit more about that.
So real brief, one of the things we decided was not to charge our clients any fees on 529 plans, even though we could, because we want to encourage them to put money away for education for their kids or their family. The other one was to charge half of our normal fee for donor advised funds, again, because we want to encourage them to put money away for charitable purposes and give it away, hopefully, as soon as they can. But we use Fidelity as custodian. They're one of the bigger ones. We're also very familiar with the National Christian Foundation, et cetera. But when we can, and it's kind of hard because we are intimately familiar with our clients' financial situation. And you've all heard the numbers, right? That Christians really don't give much more than non-believers philanthropically. And sometimes we see some great examples of generosity in our clients that are believers, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes it's important to them, but it's not in their plan until they die, which we kind of think is a bit silly, because you should give while you're living. You can see the blessings, that you can get to know the people, you can get to have a higher degree of trust in the organization, et cetera. So we're trying to nudge them along without stepping on their toes, because at the end of the day, it's between them and God, and it's their money. But when we can, we do share, especially at NCS, that God calls us to tithe. And if you're not tithing, it should be a goal. And if it's a goal and you achieve it, it would be a terrible place to stop. You really should, again, recognize that it's not yours. You're a fiduciary on behalf of his money, and we're fiduciaries on behalf of our clients' money. But and one of the things about it's very important for us, as much as we can, to encourage generosity and to bless others with what God has blessed us. I'm going to just shift and finish some thoughts. in terms of challenges, and one of them is pride, because if you didn't have much and you've succeeded to some degree, it's very easy to become prideful and think that you've accomplished it on your own. And I, again, referenced Keller earlier, but I was reminded as I was preparing for this that his reminder, the gospel destroys pride because it tells us we're so lost that Jesus had to die for us. And it also destroys fearfulness because it tells us that nothing we can do will exhaust his love for us. So we need to know we're neither good or bad. We're nothing without Christ, and yet everything because of him. And as Jim Lane used to say, God loves us too much, right, to leave us how we are and not to change us. So just some thoughts. Welcome any questions you might have. Hope this has been helpful. It's really just sharing the kind of, other than Jesus and his Holy Spirit, NCS has been a very important part of our last 15, 17, 18 years. So I'll leave you with this one question to ponder if you haven't already, and maybe discuss it with some buddies in small groups when you get a chance. But the question is not how much does God wants us to give. It's how much does he want us to keep.
Thank you, guys. They've never done this before. They've never shared this story, I believe, together kind of at NCS. And so we're just so grateful that you were willing to come up. And Andy, having, as he said, moved to Florida, flew up last night, and he's flying back today just to be with us this morning to keep his commitment, because they made this commitment before he moved. I said to Mark, I said, I hope he doesn't think he's getting his airplane ticket on us. So that was like, I mean, he was a Jersey resident when we invited him to come, But what a great example of how you brought your work and your life into your faith and what you're doing. And I just thank you for sharing that piece and just how NCS, how God used it to bring you guys together. Does anybody have a question? Because, we do have a question, actually.
Yeah, guys, thank you for sharing that. Super inspiring. I love that you kind of drop little bits of faith in different people's lives and deposit. I'm curious, Mark, you talked about being the same man in the marketplace, same man in friendship, same man in the home. How have you thought about faith in the home with your family, with your kids maybe? What's that look like, either for Mark or for Andy?
Yeah, I mean, I could start out. I would say that at home, I've done everything I could to bring my kids up into the same environment that I was brought up in. I mean, I was very blessed to have parents who knew the Lord and raised me to in faith, in a church community, learning at home, and also having the benefit of a Christian education. And I would probably say that I've tried to model that same thing for my family. And the same has been true. We're very active. I'm actually involved in the same church I've been in for my entire life, in the same church for 50 years almost. And so just, encouraging kids. I think, in some respects, I sometimes feel like I fall short a little bit now and then, but, I get so encouraged when my kids come back to me and start talking to me about questions of faith or reaffirming their belief in Christ. And my oldest daughter is she's at a secular university, and I think she's been pushing some boundaries of her beliefs and really testing the waters of what it is she believes. And I think it was actually at a retreat about a year ago. We had a really candid conversation on the phone about, just that her faith is still there. It's strong. It's, she affirmed the Apostles' Creed with me, and And so it's moments like that. I think you do get discouraged from time to time, but it's those moments, those God moments that come back that you're just like, wow, all those seeds we worked at planting, stuck around. And so, I think we do the best that we can, and we try our best. So, but I want to add to that.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've learned from Mark is that he's very service-minded, and one of the boards he's been involved with for a long time, City Relief, some of you may be familiar with that. But that was an important element of our family as the kids were growing up, was to serve together and to gain perspective about what we have and what others don't, and how we can be blessed by trying to bless others, in action. The other thing I'll mention is my son turns 32 next week, and he's getting married, but he's been to at least a dozen retreats all over the place, NCS retreats, down in Washington, down in California, and my wife was like, "Isn't that a little extravagant?" I'm like, "Hey, any chance I get to expose him to Christian businessmen, by all means." So that's been an important element in his building block. But yeah, he goes by Andrew now, but we know him as AJ. Keep him in prayer next week.
Yeah. The most refreshing thought that I heard from you was that you're not Sunday morning Christians, and you carry your character through the week, everything. Just a question: how do you view precious metals in your portfolio?
Yeah. So our asset allocation does include a sliver of gold, just in case, but a sliver. It's like 2%. We view it as generally highly speculative, along with other things that are more modern definitions of hope, if you will. And hope is not a strategy, but we're more traditional in terms of trying to buy, the Buffett type mentality, try to buy a good company and that has staying power, that has good cash flow, that has low leverage, and diversify it. So it's there a little bit. Had one pastor, actually client, he's now in heaven, but years ago came back. He called me from Europe. He was very concerned. Things he was hearing about the euro going to collapse and this or that. He wanted us to buy 20% of his portfolio in gold. And we told him, look, you're going to have to hire another financial advisor in order to execute that strategy. So we negotiated. We ended up at 3 or 4% on his behalf. But it was interesting because here's a strong man of faith who was scared out of his wits financially. One of the many interesting parts of what we do is to consider that. Yeah.
That last comment, this isn't my question, but that last comment is a bit of an oxymoron. Strong man of faith, scared out of his wits. That doesn't connect for me.
Agree.
Yeah. Here's my question. Listening to you guys is like a real flashback for me. I'm turning 77 in a couple of weeks. And I sold my firm that I built over a 30-year period of time 17 years ago. And much of my career my ministry life was defined by the business that I was building. Also a professional services firm, not in the financial world. And in that last 17 years, I've had to completely redefine my identity and what ministry looks like, because so much of it was wrapped up in my company, which had very similar virtues and values and mission statement as yours. My question for you, and this is maybe more relevant for you, Andy, is as you contemplate selling your firm or retiring, have you already begun to lay track in terms of what life looks like without business career?
That's a good question. To some extent, still early in that I just turned 67. My plan is to work for another 3 years, but from Florida most of the time. I'll be coming back and forth. And we've had a transition already that has started in terms of ownership to younger employees and now partners. But as to what that looks like, my wife and I are just beginning to explore what the future holds. We think we have found where we're going to spend our next 20 years, God willing, or however long he's got us down for before our expiration and graduation date, but to be determined. It's a great question.
Hi, I'd like to comment on what Mark said. We are blessed to have parents we had.
Yeah.
There's a friend of mine, a Franciscan friar, runs a halfway house in the Bronx, Bronx. All right? There could be 40 men there. When they have birthdays, they give them birthday cakes. Most of these men have never had a birthday cake
Yeah.
or a Christmas present. And we wonder why they're there.
Yeah.
And how blessed we are to have the parents we had.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
You know, someone asked about, family, and I think that's part of it too, is that the commitment to a strong marriage, right? And doing what that takes and serving each other, hopefully, in a way that encourages and inspires our children for the future.
First off, thank you. Super inspiring in terms of how you built this business, had the idea around centering it around your faith. So, and thank you for sharing that with us today. Mine is a specific question about tithing. And obviously you work with a lot of clients. You see a lot of these situations. I have a job where the income can really ebb and flow. Bonuses can be great one year. Maybe they're zero the next year. And so I think there are some specific instructions in the Bible around percentages and things like that. And then you got to figure out, is it before tax, after tax? Do you keep it the same every year? And so, I'm sure this is something a lot of people struggle with. I know I do, which is like, how do you really figure out, and I, we pray about it and try to find the places we're going to give that we're really passionate about and things. But just curious, anything you can share on your perspective and maybe how you guide your clients as well on that.
Yeah, I mean, just speaking personally, I think my view of it is it's, at the end of the day, it's between you and God. And I think it's important what Andy was setting the table with, that we got to remember it all belongs to Him, and that we're just stewards. We've been blessed to earn a living and to blessed with income, and so it's a question of what do we do with this, and obviously it's I think those who are given the more, I think the more responsibility you have, right? So I think at the end of the day, I don't really have a direct answer for you. I know what the answer is for myself. So about, am I tithing on the net? Am I tithing on the gross? How do taxes fit in it? I know for me, I just look at it as all income. So I'm I render to Caesar what is Caesar's, but, I think that, all the income that I receive gross is what I base my giving upon. And I think, I think to also echo, I think what Andy was saying before, hopefully I'm not stealing something he was thinking about, but, tithing is a great place to start, 10%, but not necessarily where you want to end, and Andy's been an absolute inspiration to me for, in terms of my giving, and has really encouraged me and inspired me to step up my game. So I'll just say that.
Just a couple of practical suggestions for you to consider. One is that, when you have a bountiful period, that to put some extra aside. And a donor advised fund is great for that, because if you don't have a destination immediately at hand for that charitable giving, you can get the deduction in that year and give it the next year, or in the future. The other one is that a lot of people get trapped into the rat race where you get more, you spend more, you get more, you spend more. Your standard of living keeps going up. It doesn't have to. You can draw a line in the sand and says, after this, anything that God blesses me with is going to be given away. And it's okay to, give yourself a little vacation or this or something special to celebrate, that financial success. But you're in control. You can be in control. And then the other thing is that if you're married, make a list of the 5 charitable causes that matter to you. Have your wife do it separately, and then come together and compare and see if there's any overlap. And if there is, then as a couple prioritize those causes. And then you can each give to other causes separately, but at least you're on the same page, if you will, and you have the beginning of a roadmap.
I think, isn't it somewhere in the Old Testament the first 5% goes to NCS, right? Yeah. Was something.
I think, yeah, it's NCS National.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, there's an extraordinary story of a guy named Alan Barnhart, who he and his wife started this company called Barnhart Crane. And when they started the company, they said, we want to be very purposeful, that we want to give this company to God. And they sat down, they said, all right, we're going to draw a line in the sand when we start the company. We're never going to draw a higher salary than basically it was like an intervarsity staff member, kind of a missionary, because that's what we are. And they said, God, everything over that is yours. And the company has just grown phenomenally. They have given away tens of millions of dollars. And they've now put the entire company in a trust. But they never really drew more than they drew that line, and they kept it for years and years and years and years and years.
You can't outgive God. He's got a bigger shovel.
It was a pleasure meeting you guys earlier. I'm definitely happy I didn't ask some questions beforehand, because you definitely answered them. But being in finance, I know you guys aren't living by a 4-hour work week, especially when you were knee deep into it, right? But you guys being married for so long, how did you find the balance to be able to keep your marriage and your families kind of emotionally healthy, spiritually healthy, and then also be there? Maybe it's more of like a personal question, but were there any times where you weren't able to do that, especially like in 08, 09? How did you balance during those times of development, and then also when it was highly stressful? Because I think the culture, in general, in when you're a professional is, you have to put in the time. So how do you find that balance to give to your family, but then also give to an additional child, which is your business?
By marrying the right person. No, and I'll just truncate it. It's really through prayer, right? Because on our own, we could make a big mess of it. But NCS is an important part of that too, because you can share. Sometimes you can share with another guy, another buddy, some things that you can't necessarily share with your wife in the same level. So having somebody who's got your back is an important element of that. Having a very understanding spouse is obviously an important element to that. And then giving her the grace to call you out if you're stepping over the line and you're burning out, or you're not paying enough attention, or you're not helping the kids enough. So, I think it's teamwork.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, it's ebbed and flowed. I mean, there's been a few shocking moments more recently, even I had with my conversations with my adult children, and they had kind of mentioned to me, hey, Dad, you really weren't around as much in the early years, and then part of that was launching a business, and it was just, you're doing the best you can to try to, make ends meet. First year in my career, I made a whole $6,000, and that was working a lot, and I quadrupled it the following year to $24,000. I think after a couple of years, I finally made it back to what I was earning before I left and switched careers, but there was definitely a lot of work on the front end, and it really ebbs and flows. I think there's been times in my life where I had a lot more better balance. There's also times where I've gotten super over my skis, about 4 or 5 years ago, trying to run a business, having 5 kids, having some challenges with some of my kids, serving on 3 not-for-profit boards simultaneously, leading worship in my church, leading worship at NCS, and coming to NCS meetings. It was like I kind of hit the wall. So I think it's an important consideration. I think it's always been a little bit elusive for me to try to find a good balance, but I'm still working on it. I'm still a work in progress.
And don't ever think of it as work-life balance. because that is straight from the pit of hell. God made us to work. We were created to work. We're made in the image of a working God. The term work-life balance pits work as an oppositional force to life, and God made it actually an essential part of our lives, and it makes us human. And so I urge you to think of life balance, and within that is work and family and all those things, but don't get trapped in that thing that it's, I have to reduce my work and retirement is my goal in life, even though all the Bergen County guys retire to Palm Beach. That's just like they all go down there, right? Other questions? Well, guys, we're at our time here. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having us.